Hey, friends, and welcome to the Kitchen Table Series, episode 130. I'm your host, Carol Roper, and I believe every woman can make a difference for good and for God in their homes and their communities. Through this series, my desire is that these short episodes will equip you with a practical blueprint that will inspire and encourage you to rise up, bless your families, and those in your sphere of influence. As we've entered the last week of May, I remember how crazy this time of year is for those who have school-aged children. I know a lot of parents are in what many call Maycember. The chaotic final days of the school year entail so many parties, ceremonies, graduations, proms, concerts, teacher appreciation gifts, sports tournaments, etc., etc. It can also bring lots of anticipation with kids looking forward to summer break and wondering what teacher they'll have next year. For me, however, I'm often reminded of a difficult memory that occurred over 20 years ago at the conclusion of my son's first year of kindergarten. That year, I had to tell 6-year-old Jacob he wouldn't be moving up to first grade with his friends in the fall. Several months earlier, Jacob's kindergarten teacher called my husband and me in for what we thought would be a routine conference. Expecting to hear glowing reports of our son's schoolwork, we were instead faced with a situation that brought frustration and heartache to our family. Jacob's teacher began by saying he had been very distracted over the last few months, and she felt he needed to be tested for ADD. She handed us a paper outlining the symptoms and advised us to have a doctor confirm the diagnosis. Then she dropped the bomb. I believe Jacob would be better off if you held him back a year, she said coolly. Of course, the choice is yours, she said, but he wouldn't benefit if you send him on ahead. She soon dismissed us so we could sort out our options. Because he'd done well in preschool and the first semester of K-5, we'd never considered having to hold Jacob back. We were blindsided. Since it was already the end of March, it was too late in that year to try to get him caught up. We wondered why she didn't address this issue sooner, and we were frustrated by her lack of communication. After having our doctor confirm the diagnosis, I consulted him about our best course of action. He agreed we should hold Jacob back. Crushed, I wondered how I could tell my sweet boy that he wouldn't be moving ahead with his friends the next year. He was already excited about first grade, wondering if his friends would be in his class again. Once the teacher learned she was correct about Jacob's diagnosis, she started treating him like an outcast and moved his desk away from all the other children. He didn't understand why his desk was now facing the wall, but resigned himself to the new seating arrangement. I, however, did not. Because I was unfamiliar with ADD, I assumed the teacher knew what was best and allowed her to treat Jacob poorly for the rest of the year. If I had to do it over again, I'd be in there as often as needed, questioning the validity of her actions. Even though Jacob accepted it, my very sociable little boy's self-esteem suffered. He felt excluded. It took me until the middle of July to work up the courage to tell Jacob he wouldn't be moving up to first grade. We'd just finished eating breakfast when I sat him on my lap and said I had something important to tell him. He took it about as well as I'd expected. "That's not fair! That's not fair!" he screamed over and over as his little fist kept pummeling my chest. He couldn't comprehend why he wouldn't be moving ahead with his friends. I struggled to gain control of him and my tears as the bad news sunk in. I finally wrangled him close to me and held him while he cried big, sad tears of confusion and disappointment. My heart broke. He was right. It wasn't fair. The next few years were difficult for Jacob. It was hard for him not to be able to play with his friends when he saw them on the playground or eat with them at lunch. He blamed me for holding him back. He didn't know who else to hold responsible. The next fall, we pulled into the parking lot anticipating the teacher my son Jacob would be getting for his second year of kindergarten. It was heart-wrenching returning to the same school to begin K-5 again. Because of the difficulty of the situation, Jacob's principal, Mr. Davy, offered to let me choose his teacher for his second round of K-5. Coming to check the class assignment that day was merely a formality. But when we read that teacher's class roster, Jacob's name wasn't there. Searching through numerous classes, we finally found his name listed with a teacher I wasn't very familiar with. Upset and hurt, I fought through the crowd to find Mr. Davy. Finally, running him down, I struggled to control my emotions as I asked why he hadn't granted my request. He stood there quietly for a moment and then answered. I had every intention of putting Jacob in that class, he said. But when I got to his name, I stopped and prayed. I suddenly felt he needed to be moved to Miss Meyer's class. I can't explain why. I just know this is the right thing to do. Tears welled up as I realized how much this godly man cared about my son's welfare. How could I argue with a statement like that? I thanked him and we moved on to the new class assignment. As we approached his new classroom, I debated whether or not to share Jacob's diagnosis with the teacher due to the bad experience we'd had the previous year. I finally decided it would be best to let the teacher and her assistant know so they could better understand him. As I nervously shared Jacob's situation, the assistant teacher, Miss Harris, smiled at me. I have a son who's ADD. Jacob just needs a teacher with a little patience who cares about him. Those words were music to my ears. I knew then that he'd be okay. And he was made to feel cared about in this class, and it did make a difference. I wish I could tell you his second year of K-5 was perfect, and we never had any more problems, but it wasn't. But when I needed to address something, both teachers were more than willing to help. When class assignments rolled around the following year, I was anxious to learn the principal's choice for Jacob's first grade teacher. This time, I trusted God with the decision. Scanning the class rosters, my eyes landed on a name I was completely unfamiliar with, Mrs. Wooten. I was nervous about this choice of teacher because none of the other parents knew much about her, except this was her second year teaching at our school. Once again, I debated about whether or not to share Jacob's situation with his newest teacher. This time, I decided to wait. Jacob was excited to start his first day of school. As I walked him into Miss Wooten's class that day, I decided she should know. I gathered up the nerve to ask if she had a moment to speak with me. She happily came over and I shared the dreaded ADD diagnosis with her. She gave me a great big smile and said, "That's no problem at all. I'm ADD as well." I couldn't believe it. What better teacher could he have than someone who understood the way his mind works? "We'll get along fine," she said soothingly. "Don't you worry a bit about Jacob." And they did. She was the most innovative teacher Jacob has ever had. He came home excited to show me what he'd learned each day, and I was overjoyed with his progress. I can honestly say he loved Miss Wooten, and I believed she loved him as well. She even came to one of his Little League games, cheering him on from the stands. When his time as a first grader ended, Jacob was sad to leave Miss Wooten, but was well prepared for second grade. Wow. When God works something out, he does it in the most amazing ways. Jacob still remembers what a special teacher Miss Wooten was. I believe she made all the difference in building up his self-esteem after enduring the trials of K-5. It's amazing how God can use a series of people to make such an impact on a child's life. As a matter of fact, years later we were able to find her address and invite her to Jacob's wedding. That's how much she meant to him. He still struggled with his grades, though, and endured several teachers who weren't willing to help and others who just didn't seem to care. His laughing and his witty mouth did get him in trouble on several occasions. I still remember when he was in the fourth grade and the assistant principal had him call me to admit he'd been disrupting class. I never received another phone call like that again. I'm grateful how God saw fit to put so many teachers and mentors along his path who did love Jacob, who were patient and kind and good to him. These special people nurtured and encouraged him through the years. Along the way, we found that Jacob was, like his sister, musically gifted. When he wanted to learn to play the guitar, I happily found an instructor. He quickly learned to play left-handed and serenaded us with his favorites, anything from class rock to bluegrass. When he asked for an electric guitar one year, however, I almost regretted the decision to buy it. Let's just say it was hard to think clearly when loud chords from his second floor bedroom reverberated through every room of our home. Jacob eventually found something at school he was really good at: automotive technology. During Jacob's junior year, he received the Student of the Year award in automotive technology at the Career Center he attended. And during his senior year, he was honored with that department's scholarship to Greenville Technical College, which paid a full year of his tuition. When Jacob was still in high school, my husband received a phone call from a man Jacob regularly saw when he worked for John on his days off of school. "John," he said, "if my child turns out to be half the person your son is, I'll be pleased. I've never met a young man as polite and well-mannered as Jacob. He set the bar high. I know you must be proud." Those words delighted my husband, who had no small part in influencing our son's character, efforts well worth the investment of his love and time. When John shared this man's words with me, I thought back to Jacob's first year of kindergarten and the teacher who'd shunned him after his ADD diagnosis. I remembered her passing out superlatives at the end of the year, giving him the award for most well-mannered. I knew it was the only one she could come up with in good conscience. She was required to give each child something, and because he never failed to say "yes, ma'am" and "no, ma'am" to her or any other adult, she knew he'd rightfully earned it. Those manners have served him well over the years. God created Jacob with a compassionate heart, a love of music, a mind that understands the mechanics of a vehicle, and a personality that endears him to many. Just because he didn't excel in academics didn't mean he had no skills. ADD does not have to be an academic death sentence. Yes, it's a difficult struggle, but that doesn't mean there's no hope. We researched and discovered ways to help Jacob focus better. The journey taught us that people with ADD have the ability to hone their focus better than most, if the topic is something they're interested in. That focus allowed Jacob to completely build two 1970-something Ford Broncos from the frame up, a feat many couldn't accomplish. The extra year also helped Jacob mature in ways he probably wouldn't have if we'd allowed him to move ahead to first grade with his original kindergarten class. As I look back over the years of heartache and pain, joy and fun, I remember many worrisome days. But Jacob has become so much more than I ever hoped to ask or imagine. He may not have been the valedictorian or even in the top 10% of his class, but he's shown what hard work and persistence can do. It may sound trite, but when we struggle with our children's challenges, it's important that we turn them over to God. We have little or no control over many of the situations they face, but God does. He sees the big picture, and if we'll let Him, He gives us the correct perspective. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to His purpose for them." The most important thing we can do for our children is bathe them in prayer. We may not understand why God allows them to suffer, but we can be sure He has a purpose and a plan for designing them this way. God doesn't make mistakes. He makes masterpieces. Jacob will be 29 years old in June. He's a wonderful husband, father, son, brother, and friend. He loves Jesus and lives in a way that honors Him. Sometimes I'm amazed at how well he can carry on conversations with people, even if he doesn't know them. And he's still rebuilding vehicles, having recently completed an old truck he can use around the farm. He's smart, witty, and lots of fun. His character has more than made up for his lack of academic achievements. So if you have a child who is struggling in school, has received a learning disability diagnosis, or has just been told they must be held back in school next year, let me be the first one to say, I am so sorry. I still tear up when I think about telling my little boy he was being held back and watching him struggle to try and accept it. But God has a plan and a purpose in it all. Be there to help your child navigate the path they've been given. One day you'll look back and see all God has done for them, and you'll be amazed. As I close, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Jacob's elementary school principal, Philip Davy, Melanie Harris, his kindergarten aide, and his first grade teacher, Jennifer Wooten. His third grade teacher, Bonnie Pearson, instilled a love of history that he still carries today. Thank you for that, Miss Pearson. He had several wonderful high school teachers whom I unfortunately can't remember their names, but I do remember when Mandy Watts would often sub in one of his classes, he'd tell me she'd patiently worked with him that day to get him caught up on his work. That made a lasting impression on Jacob. His automotive technology instructor was also a big part of instilling confidence in my son. To every teacher listening who loves their classroom kids well, I want you to know you do make a difference. It's a hard job. I certainly couldn't do it. And you may never see the fruit of your labor in many of the children, but they see it, and their parents do as well. And if you're listening and remembering a teacher who influenced you or your child for good, reach out and let them know. Mrs. Wooten was delighted when she found out how her influence impacted Jacob. You just might make someone's whole year. Thanks for listening to the Kitchen Table series. This is the last one I'll release until we return in the fall, but I'd love to know if you've enjoyed these solo episodes and if you have suggestions for topics you'd like for me to speak about when I return. I always appreciate your feedback. However, I still have one more interview with Christy Braddock coming next week before summer break. She has an amazingly difficult but inspiring true story to share. And I have some fantastic guest interviews lined up for the fall. I will be re-releasing some older episodes over the summer, so if you haven't been listening from the beginning, you'll have some new to you episodes show up in your podcast feed. Make sure you follow Building Strong Homes on your favorite podcast listening platform, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Did you know I have a YouTube channel where you can watch every episode? Go check it out. If you still haven't received my baked spaghetti recipe that I talked about in my first kitchen table episode, go to carolroper.org/podcast and click on this episode to receive the link to download the recipe. It's so good Guidepost Magazine published it. You'll then be signed up to receive weekly updates. And don't forget to become a member of our free Building Strong Homes Facebook community, where I'll have extra content. I have a link to that in the show notes as well. In the meantime, remember, don't give up, don't give in, and keep building strong, y'all, even when your kids are struggling. They need you now more than you know. Have a fabulous summer, and I'll see you in the fall.